Welcome everyone to Whimsy Woven Stories. Here, we explore gripping tales of real-life twists. Join our storytelling community.
My name's Ryan Faulner. I was 51 when Veltary Dynamics let me go. It's a wholesale distributor based out of Kansas City, Missouri. I had spent 15 years managing their inventory forecasting. 15 years of dead-on predictions, keeping their warehouses balanced, saving them millions by knowing exactly what would sell and when. The HR rep sat across from me in a cold, sterile conference room, hands folded over a manila folder, eyes down. She wouldn't meet my gaze when she gave me the news. Through the glass wall behind her, I could see the warehouse floor, where my forecasting algorithms had been running like clockwork for over a decade. "This is effective immediately," she said. "We've put together a generous severance package." I nodded. Didn't argue. Didn't ask why they were cutting the one department that had never once missed a quarterly goal. She looked surprised I didn't blow up or beg. Instead, I just asked one question. Who's taking over forecasting? We're shifting that responsibility to our new VP of Operations, Trevor Hamilton. He has a strong background in supply chain optimization. Trevor Hamilton. Yeah, I knew the name. Young guy, maybe 35. MBA from some fancy school. He'd been floating around the company for a few months, asking sharp questions, poking holes in our outdated methods, talking big about next-gen predictive analytics. "I see," I said. She slid the severance paperwork across the table. The offer was fair, maybe even generous. 3 months' salary plus benefits. It was clear they wanted me out fast and clean. I signed it without reading the fine print. On the walk back to my office to pack up, I passed Trevor's temporary setup. He was glued to his laptop, surrounded by printouts, my reports, my data, my forecasting models. 15 years worth of hard-earned insight that had kept Veltary Dynamics in the black through 3 recessions and all kinds of market chaos. He glanced up, gave me a polite nod. Professional. Respectful. Like he wasn't in the middle of gutting the system that made this company what it was. I packed up my things in a single cardboard box. A coffee mug my daughter gave me. A photo of my late wife, Rebecca. And a cactus that had somehow stayed alive on my windowsill for 8 years. Everything else stayed behind. The spreadsheets, the code, the forecasting models I had built from nothing. All of it belonged to the company now. About 20 minutes later, I was walking through the parking lot with a cardboard box under one arm and my final paycheck tucked into the inside pocket of my jacket. James, the security guard, waved at me from his booth. He'd been here almost as long as I had. "Take care of yourself, Ryan," he called out. "I will," I replied. I started at Veltary Dynamics right out of college, back when the company was just beginning to expand beyond regional distribution. I had a degree in supply chain management, but numbers, patterns, trends, connections others missed, those had always been my real strength. My first year, I worked under Harold Morse, the old forecasting manager. Harold was old school. He relied on gut instinct and basic seasonal trends. His system worked, but just barely. The company constantly carried too much dead inventory and ran out of in-demand items all the time. So I spent my evenings building spreadsheets, not just tracking sales, but layering in weather data, economic trends, competitor activity, regional demographic shifts. Bit by bit, Harold started trusting my projections. When he retired 5 years later, I stepped into his role and rolled out my full data-driven approach. The numbers spoke for themselves. Inventory turnover jumped 30% in that first year. Dead stock dropped to under 2%. During the 2008 recession, while other companies were slashing prices and offloading inventory at a loss, Veltary stayed profitable. We had seen the downturn coming and adjusted early. My wife, Rebecca, was proud of the work I'd done. She'd listened patiently as I explained how flu season could forecast demand for certain home goods, or how gas prices impacted regional buying trends. She used to call me her crystal ball husband. Rebecca passed away 4 years ago, cancer. After the funeral, work became my anchor. Numbers didn't lie. They didn't leave. They were steady, predictable. Everything else wasn't. Over the years, I trained 3 junior analysts. All of them eventually moved on to other companies, but each one said I taught them how to see beyond just sales reports. 2 of them still call me from time to time for advice. But lately, things had been changing at Veltary. 8 months ago, the company was bought out by a bigger corporation. The new execs came in with fresh priorities. They threw around buzzwords like synergy and operational efficiency. They brought in consultants, most of whom had never worked a day in wholesale distribution, but spoke like they knew everything about industry standards. Trevor Hamilton was one of them. He got promoted from the parent company and dropped right into our department. During his first meeting with my team, He flipped through my quarterly presentation with thinly veiled skepticism. "These models seem complicated," he said, eyebrows raised. "Are we sure this level of detail is even necessary? Most modern systems are more streamlined and automated." I tried to explain that our complexity was our strength. That tracking 17 different variables wasn't overkill. It was how we predicted market shifts months in advance. That our so-called outdated methods had kept us hitting targets for 15 straight years. He gave me a polite smile and jotted something down on his tablet. 2 weeks later, the restructuring was announced. My department was being optimized for efficiency. The signs had been there, but I ignored them. Just like I ignored the early warning signs when Rebecca first started saying she was tired all the time. Some patterns, it turns out, I was better at seeing than others. The call came on a Thursday afternoon in March, exactly 6 months after I was let go. I was in my home office working on a freelance consulting project for a small regional distributor when my phone rang. "Ryan, this is David Kellerman." David Kellerman, CEO of Velturi Dynamics. In 15 years, he had personally called me exactly 3 times, twice during major crises where my forecast saved the company serious losses, and once to congratulate me on a record-low inventory variance. "Hello, Mr. Kellerman. Ryan, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me." His voice had a weight to it that I'd never heard before. "Did you prepare forecasting models for the April through September period before you left?" I leaned back in my chair and stared at the ceiling. Of course I did. I always worked 2 quarters ahead. It was part of the reason my forecasts were so accurate. "Yes, sir. I actually built them out through October. They should be in a share drive." There was a long pause. "That's what I was afraid of. Ryan, we have a problem." "A big one?" "Trevor made some major purchasing decisions that went directly against what I now realize were your recommendations. We're sitting on almost $4 million of inventory we can't sell." $4 million? Something heavy settled in my stomach. Not shock, more like confirmation of something I didn't want to admit. "What kind of inventory?" "Outdoor furniture, garden supplies, seasonal sporting goods." Trevor was banking on a huge demand spike based on what he called post-pandemic lifestyle trends. He tripled our usual order. I didn't say anything right away. I was thinking about the models I built, the ones that clearly projected a 15% decline in outdoor furniture sales due to economic uncertainty and shifting consumer habits. The same models that recommended cutting seasonal inventory by 20%, not increasing it. "Ryan, I need to ask one more thing. Do you still have copies of those forecasts?" I did. I had everything backed up on my personal laptop, 15 years worth of refined algorithms, trend analysis, and predictive models. I hadn't planned on using any of it again. Truthfully, I tried to leave Velturi in the rearview mirror. "Yeah," I said. "I still have them. Would you be willing to send them to me?" He paused. "And Ryan, if those forecasts are anywhere near as accurate as your past work, there are going to be real consequences for the people who ignored them." I stared at my computer screen, the simple spreadsheets for my current client open across a few tabs. Easy work. Nothing like the complex system I'd built at Velturi. "I'll send them over this afternoon," I said. "Thank you." "And Ryan, I'm sorry about how things ended." The line went dead. I sat there for 20 minutes, not moving, just thinking. Then I opened my laptop and started pulling the files together. I spent 3 hours that afternoon assembling the full forecast package, not just the basic predictions, but the entire analytical framework. Weather trends, economic indicators, regional demographics, competitor behavior, everything Trevor would have needed to make smart decisions. The email I sent to David Kellerman was simple and to the point. Subject: Forecasting Models, April to October. Mr. Kellerman. Attached are the forecasting models and trend analyses for April through October. These were finalized in February, 2 weeks before my departure. The recommendations include a 20% reduction in seasonal outdoor inventory based on projected economic headwinds and shifting consumer spending behavior. Please let me know if you need any clarification on the methodology. Best regards, Ryan Fallner. I hit send at 4:17 p.m. Then I got up to make some coffee. My phone rang at 6:22 p.m. "Ryan, I've been reviewing your forecast for the past 2 hours." David's voice was tight. "Your models predicted exactly what happened, down to the product categories and regional trends. How did Trevor miss this? Did he even have access to your files?" "That's what I'm trying to figure out," he continued. "I spoke with IT. They confirmed your forecasting folder was never removed from the shared drive. Everything was still there when Trevor took over." I set my coffee cup down. "So he had access and just didn't use it?" "Worse than that," David said. "I found emails where Trevor dismissed your approach entirely. He called it too conservative and out of touch with current market opportunities. He convinced the purchasing team your methods were outdated. There was a long pause. I could hear paper rustling in the background. I'm looking at a spreadsheet Trevor put together in April. He projected a 40% increase in outdoor furniture sales based on something he called social media trend analysis and lifestyle optimization data. Did you ever use social media metrics in your forecasting? I tested them, I replied, but social media trends are too unstable and demographic specific. They don't reliably predict wholesale distribution demand. Just because something's trending online doesn't mean people are actually buying it. That's exactly what your notes say in the methodology section, David said. Apparently, Trevor didn't bother to read that far. I was quiet, absorbing what he was telling me. Trevor hadn't just ignored my forecasts, he had argued against them and convinced others to follow his lead. Mr. Kellerman, what's the current situation? We got warehouses in 3 states packed with outdoor furniture that should have sold 2 months ago. Garden supplies are now out of season. Sporting goods that no one's buying anymore. Trevor's scrambling to offload to discount outlets, but we're looking at millions in losses. And Trevor, he still claims his projections were solid and that the market just shifted unexpectedly. He's blaming outside factors and asking for more time to roll out corrective strategies. I almost smiled. Typical. Rather than owning the mistake, he was doubling down, just like other consultants I've seen who care more about being right than being accurate. Ryan, I need one more thing, David said. Would you be willing to come in and present your forecasting methodology to the board? They need to understand how we ended up here and how to make sure it doesn't happen again. The board. I presented to them once before, during a quarterly review 3 years ago. They were polite, but clearly saw forecasting as just another dull operational detail. When? I asked. Monday morning, 9 a.m. I know it's short notice, but investors are asking questions. The board wants answers. I looked around my home office. The regional distributor project could wait. This was different. This wasn't just about proving I'd been right. It was about showing what happens when experience and data are tossed aside for flashy trends and gut calls. I'll be there, I said. Thank you. And Ryan, bring everything. Your models, your data, all of it. They need to see exactly what we lost when we let you go. I spent the weekend prepping for the board meeting, but I also started digging into what had really gone on at Velteri after I left. I still had a few contacts inside, and some well-placed calls revealed details David hadn't mentioned. On Saturday morning, I met my former assistant, Jennifer Walsh, for coffee. She'd worked with me for 3 years before moving to the accounting department after my role was cut. Ryan, I tried to warn them, she said, stirring sugar into her cup. When Trevor started placing those huge purchase orders, I pulled your old forecasts and showed them to my supervisor. I told them you had predicted the opposite trend. What happened? Trevor found out I was questioning him. I got called into HR for undermining department leadership and not supporting the new direction. I almost got written up. She leaned in and lowered her voice. But that's not the worst of it. Trevor didn't just ignore your work. He told people not to even look at it. He said your models were legacy thinking and that anyone caught using them would be reassigned. That was new. Trevor hadn't just overlooked my forecasts. He actively buried them. Who else knew about this? I asked. Most of the purchasing team. Some warehouse managers. They started asking questions when all that outdoor furniture started piling up in March. Tony Vega from the Phoenix warehouse called me directly. His space was maxed out. Tony Vega. I remembered him. A sharp manager with a good read on regional demand. If he was worried, something was definitely wrong. Did anyone escalate those concerns? Trevor shut down the feedback meetings, Jennifer said. Said the new system didn't need input from the floor. That questioning his projections showed a lack of confidence in leadership. I sat back, taking it in. Trevor hadn't just made bad calls. He built a culture where people were punished for pointing them out. Jennifer glanced around the coffee shop, then pulled out her phone. I probably shouldn't show you this, she said, but I took screenshots before your files got deleted from the drive. That happened last month. Trevor said they were taking up space and confusing staff, but I saved key spreadsheets. She turned her phone toward me, email chains from April and May. Subject lines like, inventory concerns, Phoenix facility, revised forecasting questions. He hadn't just erased my work. He'd erased accountability. Every email raised valid operational concerns. But each time, Trevor responded with cold, dismissive, corporate jargon. One email from Tony Vega really stood out. Outdoor furniture inventory is currently at 340% of our normal levels for this time of year. Historical data clearly shows we should be scaling back, not placing more orders. Please explain the new forecasting method. Trevor's reply? Current projections are based on advanced analytics unavailable in our previous systems. Operational concerns should be addressed through the proper chain of command rather than second-guessing established procurement strategies. I turned to Jennifer. Was David Kellerman aware of any of this? She shook her head. I don't think so. Trevor was reporting inventory numbers straight to the executive team. David only got high-level summaries. None of the detailed concerns ever made it to him. As I finished my coffee, my thoughts turned to Monday's board presentation. This was no longer about just bad forecasts or poor purchasing choices. This was about silencing experts and deliberately burying important feedback. Jennifer, would you be willing to share those emails with David Kellerman? She nodded. I already printed everything. I was just waiting for someone to finally ask the right questions. I thanked her and drove home, now realizing that Monday's meeting wasn't just about forecasting. It was about accountability and the cost of arrogance. That Sunday evening, I got an unexpected call from Tony, Vega, and Phoenix. Ryan, I heard you're presenting to the board tomorrow. Just wanted to let you know, some of us warehouse managers have been keeping records since March. We've got photos, shipping logs, and reports on our storage capacity. How do you hear about the board meeting? Word gets around. Especially when $4 million worth of inventory is sitting untouched in warehouses. Listen, we all knew your forecasts were solid. We tried to raise concerns through the proper channels, but Trevor shut everything down. Tony explained that warehouse teams had been keeping their own unofficial documentation, tracking the growing gap between Trevor's projections and actual sales. They had photos of overfilled warehouses, complaints from customers, and detailed records that showed how bad things had gotten. But here's the kicker, Tony added. While Trevor was flooding us with outdoor furniture, he ignored your recommendations for electronics and home improvement items, the stuff that's actually selling. So now we've got a surplus of what no one wants and a shortage of what everyone does. Exactly, he said. Some of our biggest clients are threatening to leave us because we can't fill their basic orders. I scribbled notes as he spoke. This wasn't just about lost revenue. It was about failing our customers, damaging our brand, and letting leadership politics override data. Tony, would you and the other managers be willing to share this with the board directly? We already put together a full report, photos, data, everything. We've been waiting for someone to actually ask for input from the operations side. After I hung up, I stayed up 2 more hours, rewriting my entire presentation. The story wasn't about flawed forecasting. It was about a complete breakdown in communication and decision-making. I structured my board presentation into 3 sections. The forecasting model I developed over 15 years, with proven track records and real-world results. A side-by-side comparison of my February forecast versus Trevor's actual purchasing decisions, including documented warnings that were ignored. Operational evidence from warehouse managers, customer complaints, missed sales, and the real-world consequences of Trevor's decisions. Monday morning was cold and gray. I wore my best suit, the same one I'd worn to Rebecca's funeral, and drove to Veltri Dynamics HQ for the first time in 6 months. The building hadn't changed, but the energy had. David Kellerman greeted me personally in the lobby, something he'd never done in my entire 15 years with the company. Ryan, before we go up, Trevor will be in the meeting. He asked to present his side. I nodded. That's fine. The board should hear both perspectives. Also, the warehouse managers will be dialing in. Tony, Vega insisted the board needs to hear directly from the ground. We took the elevator to the top floor. Through the boardroom's glass walls, I could see 8 people seated, 7 board members, and Trevor Hamilton, looking calm and polished. David opened the door, and I walked in with my laptop, a folder of printed reports, and 15 years of expertise on my shoulders. Good morning, I said. Thank you for letting me share my perspective on the inventory issue. Trevor gave me a polite smile, like he hadn't just cost the company millions by dismissing every data point I'd ever handed him. The room went quiet as I connected my laptop. Charts, trend lines, and forecasts filled the screen. In February, before my departure, I completed models projecting demand through October. I began. They predicted a 15% drop in outdoor furniture sales, a 25% dip in seasonal sports gear, and a 30% increase in electronics and home improvement. Next slide, Trevor's purchasing orders. The contrast was shocking. Trevor had tripled the outdoor furniture orders and completely ignored electronics. The results, I said, were exactly what my model warned against. Trevor shifted in his seat. Those projections were based on outdated models that didn't account for recent consumer behavior shifts. I clicked to photos of the warehouses Tony had sent, stacked pallets of unsold furniture, shipping containers unopened in parking lots. These photos were taken last week in Phoenix, Denver, and Memphis. This is $4 million in inventory I specifically advised against purchasing. Board member Elizabeth Morrison leaned forward. Trevor, did you review these forecasts before placing orders? I did, he replied. but I found them overly conservative and not aligned with emerging opportunities. I clicked to the final slide, screenshots of customer complaints, lost client accounts, and retail partners switching to competitors. Our operational managers have detailed proof of all this. Tony Vega is standing by now. David dialed into the conference call. Tony and 3 other warehouse managers spent 10 minutes walking the board through their photos, reports, and feedback. When they finished, the room was silent. Chairman Walter Jenkins turned to Trevor. "Mr. Hamilton, do you have a response to this operational evidence?" Trevor straightened his tie. "These are temporary market fluctuations. My forecasts were based on cutting-edge analytics." I opened my laptop again. "Actually, these patterns aren't new. Similar shifts occurred in 2008, 2015, and 2019. During periods of economic uncertainty, consumers cut back on luxury purchases and spend more on home improvement." Elizabeth Morrison looked at the screen. "Ryan, what would have happened if your recommendations had been followed? Based on real sales from the last 6 months, Veltri would have seen $1.20 to $2 million in extra profit, instead of sitting on $4 million of unsold inventory." Trevor opened his mouth, but Chairman Jenkins raised a hand. "I think we've heard enough. Trevor, please step outside while we discuss this privately." Trevor gathered his things and left. The board voted unanimously to terminate his employment. David Kellerman was asked to explore legal options to recover damages caused by willful negligence. "Ryan," Chairman Jenkins said, "we'd like to offer you the role of Vice President of Operations with full authority over forecasting and inventory." I looked around at the board. People I had barely seen during my years at the company, now fully focused on my work. "I appreciate the offer. I'll need a little time to think it over." "Take all the time you need." Afterward, David walked me to my truck. "Ryan, letting you go was the worst decision this company made in 20 years. I drove home through Kansas City traffic thinking about the offer. The full authority. A chance to rebuild something better. 2 weeks later, I accepted the job. My first decision, reinstate the forecasting model I'd spent 15 years developing. My second, implement mandatory checks so no one could ever bypass operational input again. Jennifer Walsh became my assistant manager. Tony Vega was promoted to director of warehouse operations. Together, we rebuilt the communication channels Trevor had destroyed. The $4 million in excess furniture was eventually liquidated at a 60% loss. Trevor? He ended up at a consulting firm in Chicago, still advising companies on supply chain strategy. I kept that original email thread from the day David called me, not for the win, but as proof that real expertise earned through years of experience will always matter more than trendy models or empty confidence. Sometimes the numbers speak louder than words. Let me know if you'd like a shortened version or something formatted for a podcast, blog, or video script.
Thanks for listening. Share your opinion in comment section and also do like and subscribe to the channel.